Good morning. I appreciate all of you coming out today to hear about the Business Cup Challenge 2014. I'm very excited about the possibility that all of you have. We've got, at this point, I believe 5 teams here. So you're about, at this point, 1/10 of the people who have decided to join the BCC. You have a tremendous opportunity here for learning, a little friendly competition, developing some teamwork skills, and ultimately developing some skills that you'll be able to carry with you throughout your life. So by way of introduction, my name is Dan Adkins. I am the academic director of Murdoch University's campus here in Dubai. But before I became an academic director or started working in the academic field, I was in the IT industry. When I was 17 years old, I started working for a Fortune 500 company in the IT industry and worked there in various companies like Dell, Clorox, IBM, Visa, little companies you've never heard of, including Hershey's, which was really fun. They had chocolate bars all over the place. It was great. So I worked for a lot of really big companies, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. I had the opportunity to work with venture capitalists. Do any of you know what a venture capitalist is? Yes? Okay. What's a venture capitalist? Very good. A venture capitalist is a person, or very often an organization, that gives money, startup money, to entrepreneurs. Venture capitalists are hugely important in the startup of companies, especially companies that are going into riskier areas. If you're starting up a very conventional company, you may be able to go to a bank and get money from them, or you may be able to use the 3 F's. Have you heard of the 3 F's as a source of financing? That's friends, family, and fools. Okay? Friends and family, of course, will always support you, and then there are people foolish enough to invest in unproven startups. But venture capitalists, or sometimes angel investors, are the people who provide money for the really risky startups. These are the people who started things like Facebook, Google, things you use every day, right? Companies like WhatsApp. They all get funded through venture capitalists. So I had the chance to work with a number of people in the venture capital industry. I spent most of my career working in the Silicon Valley and San Francisco Bay Area. If you don't know, there's a place called Sand Hill Road. There are more venture capital companies on Sand Hill Road than any other place in the entire world. And we spent a lot of time working with companies like Piper Jaffray. After 20 years of working in the IT industry, I'd done everything I ever wanted to do. I'd been a chief executive officer, I'd been a chief information officer, I'd started and run 3 multi-million-dollar startups. I was done, and I wanted to retire from that and do something different. And what I wanted to do is what I'm doing here today, and that is to take the experience I had and to share it with the next generation so that you too can retire by the time you're 40. Does that sound good? Teachers, retire by 40? Yes? Okay. So when we're talking about the Business Cup Challenge, the first thing you need to understand is why we're doing this. And it really comes down to, we as a school, we as a university, want to give back to the community. We want to provide you something that will be valuable to you whether you go to university or not. In fact, you'll find that most entrepreneurs never go to university. The last formal schooling they get is what you're doing right now, secondary school. So let's assume that 10% of you decide to be entrepreneurs. Wouldn't it be nice to, before you set out on your own, have gotten the opportunity to have university level faculty evaluate how you do business analysis, how you make business plans? You're not going to get it if you don't go to university. So this gives you an opportunity to get that learning that could be so vital in your success later on. We want you to have the opportunity to apply the things you're learning. I'm sure that the teachers at your school have been teaching you all sorts of things about business analysis and finance and accounting, but you don't really get a chance to apply it that much. Yes, you do assignments and you get marks on them, but that's very different than having to apply it in a competitive environment. Competition can be really good because it can bring out the best in us. It can drive us to do more than we thought we could do. You know, truthfully, just between you and I, right? We all know you only have to get so many marks to pass, right? And if there are other things going on, you might do the little, weigh and balance and go, well, I won't put quite as much effort into this because I know I'll get a good enough grade to keep my GPA where I want it, and I'll spend more time on something else. But when we're in competition, we don't know what that minimum is. We want to win. And if we want to win, that means we've got to put in our very best effort, and we got to push ourselves beyond what we thought we could do. And that's what this is designed to do. It's to give you that opportunity to really demonstrate what you know and get to use the skills and get them evaluated. It's also an opportunity to learn from others. You're working in a team, so you're going to have the opportunity to share the best ideas between you. And even more important, to synthesize new ideas. In the process of solving these business cases, you're going to be going beyond what your teachers have taught you. You're going to be taking your entire lifetime of knowledge and experience and as a team synthesizing new ideas. This is something that we can't teach you as teachers. I can't get up in front of a class and tell you how to synthesize a new idea, but I can give you a challenge so that you're able to do that on your own. It also will give you the chance to learn from the other schools. You'll be able to see what the other schools have done, and especially in the final, you'll get to see the 10 best teams out of all the teams that join presenting their work. So even if you don't win this year, you'll be able to learn from everybody else and come back even stronger next year. The most important reason though, and this is the reason I started the Business Cup Challenge 3 years ago when I first became academic director, was to light a fire, to get you to have passion about what you're doing. Do you know what it means to have passion? What is passion? Any idea? And no, I'm not talking about the stuff from those cheesy romance novels, right? Okay. Well, let me tell you a little story about passion, and that can help you understand what I want you to come away from this competition with. There was a small town, and in this town there lived a very wealthy man. Everybody knew that he was the wealthiest man in town. He lived in a big mansion on top of a hill right at the edge of town, had huge property, got driven around in nice cars, always was seen going on trips and dining at the best places. Everybody knew he was wealthy. In that same town there was a young boy. He's about 12 years old, and he saw this man go by in his car day after day, saw the big house up on the hill, and he thought, I want that kind of life. I want to be like that when I grow up. So he started asking his friends and his family, how do I get to be rich like that? They're like, we don't know. If we knew, we'd be rich like that, right? So he finally decided the only way I'm going to find out is if I go ask. So one day he got his courage up, he walked up the hill, rang the doorbell, and to his surprise, the rich man answered the door. And the young boy said, sir, I know you're the richest man in town. When I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to be wealthy like that. Will you tell me how? And the rich man sort of laughed and he said, it took a lot of courage for you to come up here. I'll tell you. Let's just go for a walk. And this man's property was huge, so they walked down the hill and he had a private lake on his property. And on that lake, it was so large, he had a boat dock. And the rich man walks out on the boat dock. He hadn't said anything yet, and then he gets down on his knees like this, and he starts looking into the water. And the young boy's a little confused, but thinks, okay, maybe the answer's there. So he gets down on his knees and starts looking into the water. And as soon as he does, the rich man grabs the back of his head and shoves his face under the water. And he holds it there. And the boy starts to struggle. And the rich man keeps holding it there. And now he really starts to struggle. And just before he's going to pass out, the rich man pulls him back up, and the little boy goes, and the rich man looks at him and said, when you want success as much as you wanted that breath, only then will you have what I have. Okay, that's what I want you to take away from this. I want you to want it that bad. I want you to want it as bad as you want your next breath, because that's how you succeed in life. And that's what you need to dedicate your life to doing, because that's where you'll find happiness and that's where you'll find success. And I hope that the BCC will help you find that for yourself so you can set your direction in life. So what is the BCC? Well, it's 4 business cases that will help you learn different skills. So we'll focus in different areas, and you'll do 4 cases. 8 teams will make it to the finals based on points. So we'll be keeping track of points based on how well the cases are answered over the first 3 cases. The top 8 teams automatically go through to the finals. But the judges will pick the 9th team. Okay, so the 9th team will be based not on the points, but on some other characteristic. Maybe it's the greatest teamwork we saw. Maybe it's the team that most improved from the first week to the 3rd week. Maybe it's the most creative solution. So the judges will take a look at all of the teams that aren't in the finals and pick that 9th team. And that team will be announced at the finals. But there's one more team. And the way that that last team will be picked is by doing a pitch, pitching a business idea. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that's going to be in a moment. So every team will have the opportunity to come to the finals, and every team up until the very last minute will have the opportunity to be one of the final 10 teams. Now, just between you and me, I'd much rather be in the 8 teams that are guaranteed to go because of the points than to be counting on winning one of the 2 other slots. Okay, so I hope you all take that attitude and make sure that you do your very best from the beginning so that you're in there on points. Okay. So the cases. All of the cases are going to be based on real companies. Or it will be a situation where we're asking you about starting a business in a particular industry. Okay? The idea is to give you something that you can really work on so that you've got some base data. So you're going to be doing a lot of historical analysis, going back and looking at the company's history, because some of these cases are set some years ago, maybe 4 years ago or 8 years ago. So you'll have a lot of history to look at, and you'll be able to see what did the company do in that situation and how did it work out for them. Fair warning though, the companies I'll give you have generally failed in properly addressing the situation. So you'll get to come up with what should they have done. It's always more fun to be the armchair quarterback and sit there after the fact and go, you know, it would have been better if they'd done this. Okay? You'll just have to justify it. The issues that the company was having could come from any discipline. So when you're thinking about business, business is not just one massive monolithic discipline. Within business, you've got accounting, finance, leadership, organizational behavior, human resources, many different areas to consider. So the issues that they may have had could have come out of any of these disciplines. So it will require you to start thinking in a multidiscipline fashion. Instead of thinking just about the one thing you're best at, think across the different disciplines, because you'll find that to solve most of the cases, you're going to need to pull in things from several different disciplines. We are limiting the response. Okay, because of the number of teams, we need to do this. The first year we ran it, we let people write as big a response as they wanted. Most of them were between 20 and 40 pages, which was a huge effort to go through and rate points for. We want you to limit yourself to 5 pages, which is going to force you to be concise. So you won't be able to just dump everything you know about the theory in there. You'll need to go specifically to how that theory relates to the case and what should have been done and what the result should be. Okay? As you're writing up the case, you do not need to explain the theories. So for example, if you use Porter's 5 forces, you don't need to explain that. Just apply it and show how it would work in that case. Does that make sense? Okay. The response to the final case will not be written. The response to the final case will be a 5-minute presentation. So you can do it in PowerPoint, you can do it in Prezi, you can make a video, you can do it as live acting on the stage, whatever works for you. But you'll have 5 minutes and everybody in the team is expected to participate somehow in the presentation. Okay, so every member of the team needs to be involved in that. I mentioned the pitch. So if you're not one of the 8 teams that made it on points, you're going to need to do a pitch of a business idea. And we'll give you the specifics about that when we get to the 3rd week of the competition. This pitch is what we commonly called in the venture capital industry an elevator pitch. So imagine that you've got a great business idea, or at least you feel like it's a great business idea. And you're visiting San Francisco, you step onto the elevator, and you recognize the person standing there is the president of Piper Jaffray. Or maybe it's Sergey Brin, someone who's got a lot of money and could invest. You've got the time it takes to go from the ground floor to maybe the 20th floor of the building to convince them that you're worth listening to and they should call you back and let you give them a full pitch. So you've got 40 seconds. How do you summarize your business idea in 40 seconds in such a way that it is compelling enough that somebody who probably gets pitched to a lot says, you know what, I'd like to hear more about that. You might think, well, does this actually happen? Yes. If you go to Silicon Valley, go down on Sand Hill Road, they actually hold competitions. They have a stage set up, they've got a big clock sitting behind the people. Usually they give them 60 seconds. And companies or business teams that want to start up a company come up on stage They have 60 seconds. They're pitching to hundreds of venture capitalists. If they can convince one of them in that 60 seconds they're worth talking to, they get called back for round 2. And in round 2, they're given a huge amount of time, 5 minutes. Okay. Venture capital companies evaluate thousands and thousands of business ideas a year. Only the best get to actually sit down and have a full hour, hour and a half meeting to present an idea. So that's the idea behind the pitch. Okay? So you'll be pitching a new business idea as if you're doing it to a venture capitalist. You get 40 seconds. No PowerPoint, no Prezi, no audio visuals. Purely verbal. Because when you're in that elevator, you're not going to whip out a projector and start showing the pitch on a wall behind you. Okay, so it's got to be just verbal. And only one person from your team presents. Because in 40 seconds, you can't be switching back and forth. So if you're not in the top 8, you need to figure out who in your group is the best speaker, who's got the most passion about this, who can convince us that your business idea is the one we should go with. Any questions on the pitch? Okay, so let's talk about the case analysis. So for analyzing the cases, you'll be using historic data, most of which is freely available on the internet. If you go to finance.yahoo.com or you go to hoovers.com, you can find most of the information. The companies we'll be using are all publicly traded companies, so all of their financials and other information is available to the public. They have to file what's called a 10K report every year that covers all of this. You'll need to look at what other companies have done. So while the business case may be about one company in an industry, you need to say, well, what did the other companies in the same industry do? Or what did some other similar types of companies in other industries do? So let's look at the size of company. You know, for a company of this medium size, 1,500 employees, what are some of the strategies they've used? So try and pull the best ideas from other people. One of the things that you'll find in business, in science, in education, is we don't succeed by coming up with all of the new ideas ourselves. We do it by standing on the shoulders of giants. So don't try and come up with everything on your own. See what has worked elsewhere. If something works somewhere else, there's a very good likelihood it will work in your case, right? But also get creative. Just because nobody else has ever thought of it doesn't mean it won't work. Every day people are starting new companies of things nobody'd ever thought of before, right? Now, Zuckerberg, when he started Facebook, okay, maybe MySpace was already out there, but the person who came up with MySpace, or Sergey Brin coming up with Google. You can go back through history, and the most successful companies have usually been the ones who have gotten creative and they've come up with some sort of disruptive technology or a disruptive idea that turned the whole industry upside down. Go back to Henry Ford with the Model T. Before Henry Ford, cars were handmade one by one by craftsmen. Henry Ford, using scientific management from Frederick Taylor, came up with the idea of mass production on an assembly line. And he was able to drive down the price of cars to the point that they became widely available. It was a disruptive technology, and it made his company and himself hugely rich. So get creative. You have an advantage. When you get to be my age, you've seen so many things fail, so many different ideas that didn't work out, that you self. So if I'm thinking of a business idea, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like something else and that didn't work. You haven't been through that. You haven't seen all of these failures. So you don't yet know that it doesn't work. Some of the greatest inventors that have ever lived, when they were older, were asked, if you were to start out now, would you invent the same kind of things you invented? And they're like, no, I know enough now to know what wouldn't work. Okay? That's a bad thing that happens to us as we spend too much time in business. We get to the point where we're jaded. We think things won't work. You haven't had that. So within your brains, within your creativity, you may come up with ideas that someone like me would say, oh, I'd never try that, that'd never work. But you're not faced with that. You can come up with the real creative ideas. Have any of you ever heard of FedEx, Federal Express, the shipping company? Yeah, this was two guys, and they were in university. They were asked to come up with a business idea as part of a business class. They came up with the idea of FedEx. Their professor said, this will never work. Yeah, right. Okay? So just because I've been doing it for a long time and the other judges have been doing this a long time, that doesn't mean we have all the answers. It's young people like you who are going to build the future, and your creativity is what's going to drive that. And I'm a firm believer that the most creative ideas, the most incredible discoveries, the best books, the best poems, the best songs that have ever been written have yet to be written. And it's you who are going to do that. Okay? In my generation, we put a person on the moon, we developed the internet, the World Wide Web, GPS, computers that you can run around with in your hand. But that's nothing compared to what you're going to do. Okay, I want you to really believe that, because if you believe it, you can achieve it. You're going to use a lot of business analysis tools, and I'm going to highlight a couple of those for you. If you're not familiar with them, go back and talk to your teachers. Let them familiarize you with those, or do some research on your own. Okay? We're having fun with the technology today. Okay, so the first of them, Porter's 5 forces. Are you all familiar with Porter's? Okay, Porter's 5 forces is about scanning your environment as a business and figuring out what your competition is like and what your competition is likely to be like. So you're looking at things like, how strong are your suppliers? If you're buying your supplies from companies, then you shouldn't have any problem. Okay, if you're buying your supplies from many companies and it's something that's common, you shouldn't have any problem. If one of your suppliers decides to stop supplying you, then you go to another one. Easy. But what if you're buying your supplies from one supplier and they're the only one because either they have a patent on what they're supplying to you, or it requires so much investment to set up that kind of supply chain that nobody else has done it or is willing to do it? Well, in that case, your supplier has a lot of power over you. Similarly, you look at your customers. If you're selling to 10 million customers, all who represent a small fraction of 1% of your sales, one customer more or less is no big deal. But what if you make, for example, rockets? Elon Musk, who made his fortune in the internet, set about and started a company called SpaceX. They make rocket ships to carry human beings into space. There are only 5 countries on Earth that send human beings into space, right? The US, Russia, China, India, and the UK, right? They don't have much of a market. So each one of their customers has a huge impact on them. The threat of new entrants, how easy is it for somebody to come in and compete with your business? The threat of substitute products. if you were Sony and you were making the Walkman that played a CD, what happened when MP3 players came out? Suddenly there's no market, right? Why would somebody want something that big and they have to carry around a whole bunch of plastic discs when they can have something much smaller and have their entire collection on it, right? So that's a substitute product. And then, of course, the competitive rivalry. How hard are your competitors willing to go against you? Okay, so that's just a quick rundown of Porter's 5 forces. So you'll need to look at that. You might read a little bit more about it and find out that people have actually suggested that there are additional forces that should be considered, such as the government, the public, and even how hard is it to leave an industry? Imagine that you were running a business and you weren't making much money at it, but to get out of that business was going to cost you $4 billion in 10 years of cleanup time. It's better to go along and make a few $100,000 a year and keep that business running forever than to spend $4 billion to close it. Okay, so exits can also be big. Also look at what's called the pestle model. Pestle is another way of scanning your environment outside of your company and looking at political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal factors. Right? So you'll be applying the same kind of analysis as you're looking at the cases because you need to take all of these into consideration. You're probably familiar with SWOT, right? SWOT analysis, you're looking at the inside of your company. So you're saying, what are our strengths and weaknesses? How do we maximize our strengths and overcome or minimize our weaknesses? And then outside your company, what are the opportunities and threats? How do we seize the opportunities and make the most out of them? How do we overcome the threats? So you'll also be using a SWOT analysis. Then the BCG matrix. BCG is the Boston Consulting Group, and they came up with a very useful matrix to look at the products that you have and decide whether you should invest more, whether you should skim the profits out of it, or whether you should close them down or sell them off. So with the BCG matrix, you've got the cash cows that are making you huge amounts of money, the stars that are rising, also making you good amounts of money, but needing a lot of investment so that they hopefully someday become a cash cow. You've got the dogs, which are making you very little or maybe losing money, and you need to get rid of them. And then you've got the question marks. They could go either way, depending on what you do with them. So when you're doing the case analysis, you'll need to look at the product mix that they have and decide which products fit where and how can they introduce a new star. Okay. Okay, so these are just some of the tools that you may use. Okay, you've probably been exposed to other tools for analysis. In marketing classes, you probably learned about the 4 P's of marketing: product, place, promotion, or the 7 P's of services marketing, things of that nature. You'll need to pull all of this together in doing the case analysis. So let me just very quickly give you an example of a case that we used in the first year, just so you can have an understanding. Are you all familiar with the company Visa, the credit card company, right? Okay. Now, Visa and MasterCard are the 2 largest providers of credit card services in the world. And they don't just provide the credit cards. Okay, those are actually in partnership with banks. The other thing that they provide and where they make most of their money is on credit card processing. You go to the store, swipe your credit card, authorization code comes back, the money gets transferred from your bank to the bank of the company you bought something from. That's where Visa and MasterCard make their money. But think about it. With the age of the internet, are you seeing other ways that people can pay for things? Like PayPal, Bitcoin, or now Apple has just come out with the Apple money, where you can actually just use your phone and near-field communication to pay for things. Visa's not doing any of those things. They had the opportunity. Even things like chip and PIN cards. I worked at Visa back in the early 90s. One of the projects I worked on was the first chip and PIN cards to be used for the 1996 Atlanta Olympic Games. They were great. They were called stored value cards. You didn't have to have a bank account to get one. You could load it up with however much money you wanted, and it was secure. If you lost the card, you had the number from the back of the card, which hopefully you kept the little receipt, and you could get it replaced if you lost it. But without your PIN, it wasn't useful. So if you lost it, instead of like losing cash, which somebody can take and use, if you lost the card, you didn't lose any money, which for people coming in for the Olympics was huge. Are any of you running around with stored value cards? So what happened? Okay, so that would be one example of a case. Given Visa's lead in already having the technology for clearing credit card transactions, already having developed a chip and PIN card, why is Visa not the #1 provider of cashless transactions? MasterCard isn't either. Now PayPal is the largest supplier of internet-based transactions. Right? So why is that? That's the kind of thing you would get on a case. And what could Visa have done differently? What kind of products could they come up with? What kind of strategies could they have taken? Okay? Okay, so enough of me talking. Any questions about this? No questions? Are you all ready to go out and win? Okay, we've got, oh, yes, sir.
Hello. Actually, most of the analysis you have shown is for advanced level, like they are studying in A levels. So the who are participating in the initial level, they are in IGCSEs, O levels.
Yes.
Will be they able to do that all?
Yeah, what we found is that students in 11th, 12th, and 13th year have been able to use these. They're surprisingly clever at looking things up on their own and figuring out how they work.
So, but the students who are in grade 11 at the moment, like the I1 have in the school, so they haven't gone through with these analysis like BCG matrix and SWOT analysis and all that stuff.
Right.
So will be they able to cope with that problems?
Yeah, absolutely. What we found is one of the big benefits of this is the students learn how to learn on their own, which they're going to have to do throughout their career.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, now for your schools, I know that one of the schools here already has 3 teams. For the other 2 schools, you can have up to 3 teams from your school. If your colleagues would like to participate, by all means, feel free to ask them to join if it's okay with your teachers and counselors. We'd also encourage you to, as you're participating, definitely participate on the Facebook page, and also if you tweet the hash BCC 2014 hashtag is available. One of the awards that we have given out last year was for the team that participated best in social media. So definitely have that as an aspect of what you're doing. In any business today, your social media presence and your social media marketing is a huge aspect of how you reach out to customers. So again, it's good practice for you to get in the habit of doing that. Put things in your social media that will make the judges think, wow, this team really understands digital marketing, so even if they don't make it on points, we'll make them the 9th team. Okay, so that's one of the ways you can get into the finals. Okay, any other questions? Great, well thank you so much, and we are here anytime to answer any questions that do come up for you. I wish you all the best.